Hi, my name is Abdulrahim. I'm a DPhil student in computer science.
My name is Eamon Atty, and I did the BCL last year, and I'm currently a judicial assistant at the Court of Appeal.
Hi, my name is Ashleigh Barnes. I did the BCL at Oxford last year, and this year's the first year of my DPhil in law.
I'm Emilie McDonnell, and I'm a DPhil in law student.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Kaelin. I'm a DPhil candidate in law.
Hi, my name is Rahul Bajaj. I'm an MPhil in law student here at Oxford.
My name is Rishika. I am currently a DPhil student at the Faculty of Law at Oxford.
Hi, I'm Sanya Samtani, and I'm a DPhil in law student at the University of Oxford.
I did the student fellowship scheme at the Joint Committee of Human Rights in the UK Parliament, working on the inquiry into privacy and discrimination online.
I did a summer fellowship at Justice last year.
I undertook the Bonavero Student Fellowship at Redress, an international human rights law NGO in London.
I undertook an internship with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees.
I undertook the placement at Turpin and Miller, an immigration solicitor up the Cowley Road.
I pursued an internship at Reprieve last summer through the Bonavero Fellowship, and this was after finishing the BCL.
I went to Johannesburg, South Africa to work with SERI, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa.
The internship that I've undertaken through the Bonavero Institute is a foreign law clerkship at the South African Constitutional Court.
Justice is an all-party human rights and law reform organisation that looks to strengthen the UK justice system. And it does this mainly in three ways. Number one, through working parties that produce reports. And number two, through consultation responses on draft legislation and briefings to officials and politicians. And number three, through third-party intervention. At Justice, I was lucky enough to work on Bill number 2, the prorogation case, and that's involved doing comparative research into case law in other jurisdictions in Europe and elsewhere to see if whether prorogation has ever been overruled by the courts. And based on that research, it helped to inform a justice decision on whether to intervene or not in the Miller case. There's an immensely friendly and family atmosphere at Justice. There's something about that organisation that really engendered a non-hierarchical approach. So it was really easy to get feedback from my supervisors, and they were very invested in my career in terms of offering advice.
So the work at Turpin and Miller kind of fell into two different categories. So the first was going to Huntercombe for a national men's prison just outside of Oxford. There we would do the equivalent of a surgery or an intake with incarcerated individuals. The second was back at the offices of Turpin Miller itself. That really helped, that really covered all facets of casework. For my doctorate, I'm researching women's experiences of pregnancy and childbirth in carceral space. Tom Giles at Turpin and Miller was gracious and thoughtful enough to assign me to cases where women's asylum claims were based on their status as mothers and their rights to remain with their children. This work, so often read about in legal journals and in the abstract, affects real people and their families. So perhaps that's not society writ large, but society is defined in the life of one person and the family members who love them.
It's a great and very intimate team that conducts both advocacy and policy work, as well as strategic litigation for torture victims. And their remit is primarily focused on torture, but does include other international criminal law and international human rights law, as I mentioned. My role was to primarily work on one project, which was a transitional justice report on Sudan. What's happening in Sudan is absolutely pivotal. We've had this culmination of years of protest and efforts and the fall of this regime that perpetuated international war crimes and international human rights violations. So to be part of the group of people committed to creating a sustainable and profound change in society at all levels of society and in all areas of law was an incredibly rare opportunity and will certainly affect the lives of Sudanese people and hopefully even more broader the rest of Africa.
So my key takeaway from the fellowship was actually sort of getting a good insight into the inner workings of government, particularly how committees and governments work with each other. So I was sort of working on a specific inquiry to sort of make recommendations to the government on how to improve privacy online and also sort of prevent discrimination against sort of certain users. I felt like the project I was working on had a sort of real impact on society because it was looking at sort of specifically how we should be changing regulations or the way government works and also how private sector works in order to improve or enhance people's sort of right to privacy and discrimination. And a sort of particular way where this was sort of the example where it's sort of really shown that we cared a lot about impact was that we had an element where we had sort of citizens so sit in inquiries with us and kind of give us sort of real feedback as to what they thought the sort of key issues from what they heard and also what they were sort of some seriously concerned about from the sort of discussions that we had with both private sector companies, but also sort of members of the government and the legislature as well. I would highly recommend this fellowship to my peers, particularly because it's a unique opportunity that I think it's pretty hard to get as a sort of research student or even just a sort of graduate student at the university. It sort of gives you the balance of sort of having interaction with the real world to see how sort of your research and sort of academics sort of work can be impactful in the way sort of society is run and also sort of helping make government advice.
Judicial clerkships are quite different from working with, say, an NGO or with a barrister or an attorney, simply because you get to see the other side of the process. As a law student, you particularly rely on judgments as key texts that you use to construct a legal argument or that you use as a litigator to construct an argument to put before a court. But no one really knows what happens on the other side. And judicial clerkships are unique because they can help us explore what happens on the other side. So I picked the South African Constitutional Court because my DPhil research is also partly based on South Africa. And in addition to that, South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. I was very interested to see how law would help tackle that inequality, particularly in a jurisdiction that has such a strong focus on the enforcement and implementation of socio-economic rights. My work at the South African Constitutional Court involved basically assisting the judge that I was clerking for with legal research and with other memoranda that helped me put my research skills to good use. The other interesting aspect was the community that I built through this job because I landed up working with a group of highly motivated young legal minds, and we had quite a lot in common even though we came from different parts of the world.
So essentially with UNRWA, we're working with Palestinian refugees and they may be in one of our 5 areas of operation, so Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Jordan or Syria, or they may have left the area and have gone to a destination state. So they may have come to Europe to seek refugee status. So I think the type of work we're doing from the casework perspective is making sure there's no legal gap in protection for those who are under the UN Refugee Agency or under UNRWA. And then in terms of general research and general policy documents, we're really making sure that we're conveying through our policy briefs and legal documents the human rights and protection issues for Palestinian refugees in those areas of operation. And so it was really great to be involved in that. It was extremely interesting when I was there to be able to meet and talk to people about freedom of movement issues, which is something I look at in the DPhil, and how that affects Palestinian refugees. And that's basically provided me with a much more holistic understanding of my research, but also how my research fits into the wider area of refugee law and human rights law, and how it applies in different contexts other than the one I'm focusing on in my DPhil.
So Reprieve is an organization that was founded by Clive Stafford Smith in 1998, I believe, and it works on a large set of human rights issues, from working to ensure the reduction in the implementation and administration of the death penalty to countering the use of lethal force. And so its core agenda is to engage in human rights litigation and advocacy. The seminal contribution that I believe I was able to make during the fellowship was in the shape of a project that they were working on to prevent an impending drone strike in a particular country. There was also some amount of work that I did around military operations and collaboration between countries, and the export of components that go into the making of drones. So a lot of work around remote warfare and counter-terror operations. If people are interested, as I was, in understanding the application of human rights in practice, in understanding the practical constraints within which human rights are sought to be made real on an everyday basis, then this would be an ideal place to be at.
So SERI is responsible for leading social and economic rights cases before the Constitutional Court in South Africa, especially to do with the right to housing in South Africa. So the jurisprudence under Section 26 of the South African Constitution has been evolved through cases done by SERI over the past 10-15 years. My DPhil is on the right to housing in India and South Africa. So through this internship, I was able to experience litigation happening on the ground, as well as research and advocacy happening on the ground around the right to housing in the city of Johannesburg. SERI does fantastic work on socio-economic rights, and it's extremely well organized. It works very closely with activists on the ground, as well as with other public interest organizations in South Africa. So just the model of working and thinking about rights and thinking about how rights should be extended is very interesting.
So my future career plans are to qualify as a barrister and build a practice here in the UK. And my experience at Justice has been really helpful for that. In interviews that I've had already, I've been asked about my Justice internship. It generates a lot of interest, especially from chambers, because you're working on domestic UK law. So it's issues that will be close to their minds.
Going into the internship, I thought I was quite certain that I was interested in a career in legal academia. And while that may still very well be the case, this fellowship made a convincing and compelling argument for the merits of practicing.
What I really missed from academia and what the Constitutional Court clerkship gave me was one foot in practice. And it sort of made me see that whilst academic work was incredibly important and incentivized slow thinking, it was equally important for that research to be out there and to be used in actual practice.
I think the internship perfectly allows you to both make a contribution but also develop yourself as a practitioner.
I am currently doing a PhD in the sort of use of artificial intelligence in the legal sector, both in terms of the benefits and the risks that arise. So I think the fellowship really offered me sort of an insight into, firstly, like how companies and also other members of other institutions are using technology to sort of improve certain aspects of day-to-day life, but at the same time, it gave me a key real insight into how people are affected by the risks, and made it very real as opposed to a theoretical idea as to how privacy rights are important, or also how discrimination might affect individual rights.
While the internship may not have directly helped me in terms of the areas of law I intend to practice in, the way it helped was in terms of developing a set of views on how complex problems can be dealt with, in terms of how coalitions can be formed.
So one of the really great things about the internship is that it confirmed to me that I do want to pursue a career with an international organisation in like a legal capacity or legal officer type role. And after I finish my DPhil, I hope to apply for one of these international organisations, whether or not it's the UN or a smaller organisation, I'm not sure, but I know that I want to be within one of these refugee type organisations.
The Bonavero Fellowship Internship Scheme enabled me to undertake an opportunity that would have otherwise been untenable in the absence of financial support.
The Bonavero Institute are quite rigorous with their approach. They make sure you're allocated a supervisor and draw up a plan, and there's feedback, which there's a lot of emphasis on. So that helped. The Bonavero Institute having links with these organizations and learning about them when I was going through the application process, it was really helpful to gain an insight into all the opportunities on offer. And because of the strong partnerships, there's real value in that in terms of opening doors.
I don't think I would have been able to undertake this exact internship without the support of the Bonavero Institute. First of all, the actual securing of the internship was seamless. Secondly is the financial support of the Bonavero Institute, which meant that I could undertake this incredible opportunity, both developing myself as a human rights practitioner and also making a valuable contribution to a very small organisation that needed additional support.
The first and most important, I think, for me as a person with a disability was that because I had this support system in place, I knew who to reach out to in order to channel my request to Reprieve for all the accommodations I needed. And more broadly, even in terms of ensuring that I had access to accommodation close to Reprieve's office, to the training that I needed to get around and things like that, I relied on the Bonavero for that. And the funding was actually indispensable for me in pursuing the fellowship.
I had organised the internship myself and applied. However, I couldn't have gone without the support of the Bonavero Institute because I needed the funding to go. It's an expensive place to live, and obviously this is an unfunded internship. So I was funded by the Bonavero Samuel Pisa Travelling Fellowship.
The Samuel Pisa Travelling Fellowship gave me exactly what I needed, because not only was it a bursary that covered my costs and enabled me to actually live and work in Johannesburg, it also enabled me to speak to past fellows who had also undertaken a similar Samuel Pisa Travelling Fellowship and talk about the nexus between academia and practice.
So the Bonavero arranged my fellowship slightly differently, in the sense that the Joint Committee of Human Rights had reached out to the Bonavero for a fellow to work with them on their team, and I was then put forward to interview for the position, and on a successful interview I was then offered sort of a position to lead the inquiry for the team.
This internship was very useful for me because I designed it. This is an organization that I knew of and I wanted to work at, and I used the OPPP fund to be able to work at this organization. So I would encourage people to use internships in this manner, to design an internship that works best for them, that is in an area of law that they're interested in or in a jurisdiction that they're interested in. And that would be very helpful for their own lives, their own careers, their own research agendas.
I think, yeah, the key thing to take away is that it's sort of a unique opportunity that you probably can't get anywhere else. So it's probably worth giving it a shot.